هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to the Saturday edition of Let's Talk. Thank you for joining me and thank you for keeping me company for the next hour and a half. We'll be looking at how to buy property and other valuable items on auction, the do's and the don'ts, and the pitfalls involved in buying on auction. We're also going to be looking at the Clover factory buyout by an Israeli company. But first up, we're going to be looking at the anti-smoking lobby. Has it all gone up in flames? Is it still forging ahead and making us, the general public, aware of the dangers of smoking to our health? We've spoken with Dr. Saluji in the past in studio, and he's given us wonderful updates. He has since retired, and at the helm now we have Savera Khalidin. She is the Executive Director of National Council Against Smoking. Let's hear where they're at and what are their plans going forward to rid the public of this scourge called smoking. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Lovely to have you, simply because you guys are doing some important, and I should also perhaps add, amazing work. Undoubtedly, this campaign, I think, started way back in 1976. We're not sure if the public was really paying attention, whether they heeded the call of an organization like yourselves. But recently it has gained momentum. Where are we as South Africa as compared globally as far as the anti-smoking campaign is concerned?
So you were right to mention our colleague and board member, Dr. Saluji, Professor Seftel. You know, Professor Seftel started the organization in 1976 and has been active consistently since then. And Dr. Saluji really spearheaded the first round of legislation that was introduced in South Africa that banned marketing and advertising of tobacco products, introduced restrictions of smoking in public places. So, we are moving ahead on the agenda that they started with great success. What has happened in the last 20 years since we first started getting good tobacco control policies is we had about 4 out of 10 South Africans smoking, and now we've got 2 out of 10. Yeah. So we've halved, actually, So that's a huge success. And when these things were introduced, when the text warnings on cigarette boxes were introduced, this was groundbreaking. No one else on the continent was doing it. And in fact, we were leading in many places in the world. Unfortunately, we are a bit behind now. We need to catch up with what has been happening on the continent. But most importantly, we need to improve our tobacco legislation to reduce the number of people that are smoking even further. From 20%, we would like it to go to 10% or 5%. Why? One, because there's a major health risk to the individual that's smoking. There's a health risk, secondly, to the people around the individual. And there's a cost factor. There's a cost to the individual that is smoking, for the cigarettes, for the short-term health implications, and then the long-term health implications, because you will get ill, and seriously ill, if you smoke. And all of that is a financial cost. And of course, for people who use the public health system, all of us are paying for that. And families lose a breadwinner if that person dies, or if that person becomes very ill early in life, in their mid-40s or mid-50s, you're losing 15 or 20 years of their productive life. So this is why we need to see the change as well. And happily, we can say that we have a draft bill out for public comment. It came out for public comment in May last year. and the Department of Health is currently reviewing all the submissions that they have received from the public, and they will make changes to the bill, and we'll see improvements, major improvements in our tobacco legislation.
So undoubtedly, we've had Dr. Saluji in a couple of times talking about the progress that has been made, and as you've also indicated that we have halved the amount of smokers in South Africa from 4% to 2%. Would that be the correct figure?
From 4 out, yeah.
Yeah. So we're sitting at 2. Is it still worth your while as the National Council Against Smoking to be putting so much of effort in possibly eradicating smoking completely from South Africa? Or should we start looking at other areas of public health?
So it's 2 out of 10, which is about 20% of people smoking, right? That's what we've got. So, so we do have a reason to continue. I mean, any of your viewers would know how very expensive medical care is in the country. So we want to reduce it for those reasons. And it's related to almost every other illness that people have. So HIV, TB, diabetes, heart disease, obviously all the lung diseases, asthma. If you smoke, all of those diseases are aggravated. Your own health conditions worsen, and your experience of being ill worsens, and of course the cost that goes with it. So smoking is not something that we look at in isolation. Their environmental impacts as well, their job impacts as well. So, you know, for many, many reasons, we need to still work on reducing it.
You talk about job impacts, and I'm playing devil's advocate
of course,
here.
Please do.
The tobacco farmers, very especially north of our borders as well, that was a lucrative industry, as it was all around the world, have complained about possibly being out of money, out of pocket, out of work. They've lost their farms, etc. They've lost this very lucrative stream of income. How do you respond to something like that?
So obviously jobs are very important all over in our region, not just in our country. So the countries that grow tobacco, we grow very little. The countries that grow tobacco are Malawi and Zimbabwe. And, you know, the tobacco industry will tell you that it's lucrative. They will tell you that they are creating jobs. But the research that has come out of those countries has shown us that actually it's a poverty cycle of living.
How
almost
so?
Almost slavery. So how so is the fertilizer, the seeds are bought directly from the tobacco company. The price that you're going to earn for those leaves are decided up front.
Totally controlled.
So you negotiate as the farmer up front. But when you get your yield or your harvest, they say, the tobacco company will say to people, this is not a good crop. We said we're going to give you 20 Rand a kilo, for example, and we're going to now only give you 17 Rand a kilo. You have no other market because they have a monopoly.
They control.
Yeah. So basically you start the year in debt, you end the year in debt. And you know what's also very, very sad is that children of families who grow tobacco, they pulled out of school to go and help on the farm. Directly touching the tobacco leaf creates all kinds of health problems for them and leaves them continuously behind. So there are more sustainable ways to make a living, and we need to put more pressure on our governments to actually do that. Tobacco farming is not a sustainable livelihood for our people, not at all.
Are you able to draw a sketch of the alternatives for these farmers? And most of them probably own a small piece of land, and that's what they live off. But if you give them a viable enough option, do you think you're able to sell the concept to them?
Yes, look, in South Africa, because we have so few farmers, we have engaged on that issue around several things. One, there's things called biofuels, okay, that people can be trained to plant. It does not cause any degradation to the land whatsoever, so that every single year they can continue to increase their yield, and then that can also be used to assist us with things like electricity. Okay, so the World Wildlife Fund, the South Africa branch, is working on that and trying to bring this into the tobacco arena to say that we don't have to just look at things you can sell to the harm-causing industries, that you can actually, there's food production, of course, but some support is required from the Department of Labor, from the Department of Agriculture, and often, you know, the tobacco industry is seen as an easy alternative because it's already been there, and the investment of time and energy that's required from other government departments might not be forthcoming as it should be, but those alternatives are there. That is just one alternative that we've given you. But in other countries, in Philippines, for example, they've come up with multiple sustainable options, including, you know, because you're coming up with a different product, you're growing a different product, you need to get to the market, helping people to buy vehicles that they can transport all the small farmers' products to the market and sell it, and finding that they double, triple, even quadruple their income. So there's a lot of potential. Definitely, there's a lot of potential.
You spoke about advertising earlier as well, and you spoke about costs not only to individual smokers but to obviously entire communities. Have the, I'm not a smoker, so I don't know what smoking cigarette packages look like these days. There was talk at one stage that all the packaging is going to be absolutely uniform, so one brand doesn't get preference over another brand, etc.
Yes.
Prices will probably be fixed as well in an attempt to hopefully curb and to stop cigarette smoking. How far down the line are we with that?
So the uniform packaging is, we call it standardized or plain packaging. That's in the draft bill that was out for public comment last year. And you're absolutely right. It would all be, say, in brown paper or beige paper, and using the same font to tell you which product it is. And there would be a big pictorial warning. So you would see, you know, a baby in an incubator, you know, with tubes because the lungs have been underdeveloped at birth, or you would see somebody with lung disease, all the diseases that a person can get. That's what the warning is going to be. And as soon as the draft bill has been accepted and gone back to Parliament, that will definitely become law. And this is important because the cigarette pack has become the last place where tobacco companies can advertise their product. Now, you know, we live in a world where symbol, imagery, brand is so important. You throw your car keys on the table, everyone knows, you know, they can categorize you. And the very same applies to cigarette packs, right? Because some of them are cheaper, middle priced, and then higher priced. So people say who they are or where they fit in. Just
by the brand of cigarettes they smoke.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to talk advertising and illegal cigarettes as well right after the ad break.
Sure.
We're talking about the anti-smoking lobby. We know it started way back in 1976. Undoubtedly, it's gained lots of momentum, but there is still work to be done against this scourge on society. Don't go away, we'll be talking more about the anti-smoking lobby. Savera Khalidin is here, and she is the Executive Director of the National Council Against Smoking. We do know that it's been in our faces for a long, long time, but it seems that it is still around, and that is why the Council is still forging ahead with this fight against smoking. Now, we spoke advertising. What about the issue around illicit or illegal or counterfeit cigarettes, which seems to have captured the market? So on the one hand, you guys are doing great work lobbying and creating awareness about the dangers of smoking to one's health, community in the entire country. And then you're having these very cheap counterfeit cigarettes coming in through the back door, which seems to be making a roaring trade. Should that not also be stopped? And how do you make the public aware of the dangers? Because we're not sure where those cigarettes come from and what exactly they contain.
Sure, that's a really important question. You know, the illicit or illegal cigarettes are really cigarettes often produced by the very same legal tobacco company.
Ooh.
Yes, it's a global problem. And the difference between the legal cigarettes and the ones you pay full price for generally is because the illegal cigarette, has not paid, tax has not been paid on it. We have excise tax on all of our cigarettes. So when that excise tax is not paid, which is about 17.45 or thereabouts now,
Percent?
No, rands.
Okay.
Then you
per packet?
Per
no?
packet. Per packet.
Okay.
So the producer is able to sell that product for 10 or 15 rand because they're not paying the tax that's due. Now, this is a criminal problem. And we have very high levels of criminality, unfortunately, in South Africa generally. And in countries where there's a lot of corruption, you will find that there is a high percentage of illicit and illegal trade of tobacco because
it's an easy market, it's a quick market, you can turn over very quickly.
Well, it's a form of white-collar crime, actually. That's what it is. So you would have big players involved, and unfortunately, the NPA has not been functioning the way it should have. Our police system has a lot of problems, and we know that over the last 10 years we've seen severe problems at SARS as well. And SARS is, together with the NPA and SAPS, are supposed to be monitoring the tobacco manufacturers. So by monitoring, what we mean is that there is a legal requirement on them to be counting those boxes at a very simple level. Someone is supposed to be counting the boxes on behalf of the state to make sure that the number of boxes that are produced, that tax is paid on all of those boxes, and that those boxes can be tracked to anybody smoking on the street. It should be that specific. We should not have any cigarette packs on our street that cannot be traced to the manufacturer in our country, or the country that we bought it from, or the country it passed to get to us. That's what is supposed to be happening, okay? And that is what's not happening.
So what are you, as a National Executive Director, heading up this body, doing about something like that?
Okay, so we work closely with researchers who try to understand the extent of the illicit trade in the country so that we can give the other side, the true side, of what the size of the illicit market actually is, and not relying only on the tobacco industry to tell us how big that market is. And there is evidence that they have been lying for a very long time. UCT does a lot of research in this area, so there is published evidence about that. I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted you.
No, please carry on.
The second thing is that the World Health Organization has come up with a protocol which basically tells countries how to stop the illicit trade. What is required for us to connect with what is happening regionally and globally to control this. We were the first country to sign, right? But we did not ratify. And ratify is important because it forces us to kickstart the process of implementation. So we have been basically lobbying for the ratification and implementation of this. In simple language, it's tracking and tracing of every cigarette packet. Any tobacco product, we need to track it and trace it. It's like you have a VIN number on a car that tells us whether that car is legally bought and sold and used in the country, right? If you open the engine, they will tell you there's that number, and it can sometimes be scraped. So all our cigarette packs actually are scraped VIN numbers because we don't have a VIN
and
number on
it is
them.
doable, even though you're talking about millions on millions of packages of cigarettes. But that being said, you may get the naysayers or people, pro-smokers,
Yes.
who would argue that you as the council has created this gap for illegal or illicit cigarettes coming into the country because you've taken such a hard stance against the advertising and distribution of cigarettes.
So look, people who want to make money from something that causes death and disability will say whatever they want to say because it is a huge money-making industry, okay, which is legal in South Africa. So even if we had tracking and tracing, the tobacco companies will make a huge profit. But unfortunately, they want to make more than that profit. Some of them. That is why some of them are involved in this illicit trade. So we are not saying close down the tobacco industry. We are saying where there is criminality in our country, whether it is at auctions, as you were talking about, second-hand cars, which shouldn't be on the road, any other kind of criminality, stop it. This is criminal behavior, and criminal behavior must be dealt with by the criminal justice system. It should not impact on public health policy.
All right, you come from a public health background
Yes.
and an education background
Yes.
as well. And of course, you speak from a position of power because you do know how harmful cigarettes is to the country and the economy as a whole.
Yes.
That being said, are we not focusing our direction in the wrong areas in terms of awareness and education? Should we not be going to grassroots levels and make people aware about the dangers of cigarette, how harmful it is to your health, and the fact that we should be speaking about it in a harsher tone? We should be legally specifying cigarettes as an illicit drug.
You know, we live in a democracy. So it's very difficult for us to go to making something that is currently legal, illegal. Because the same would apply for alcohol. Because these are drugs. The problem of legality of them today is that they were produced, discovered, started to become used by the public before the health impact of the drug was evident to scientists. So basically, if we discovered cigarettes today, they would be illegal.
Much like sugar, the use of sugar, or the overuse of sugar.
Yes, yes, exactly. So, you know, it's so our role, and as you are helping us to fulfill today, is to inform people. Yes, we should be doing it every single day, and we try to do it every single day. The public health system tries to do it every day, to inform people about the dangers. And that's one role of public health. The other role of public health is to make it easy for people to make the healthy choice. And how do you do that? You make it harder for them to access the unhealthy product. So you do that by making the product expensive. You do that by restricting the places where they can use the product. You do that by banning the advertising. And you do that by making sure that children don't have access to that product. So there's, you know, there are different ways of addressing public health, and the information and education role is definitely there. But at the population level, it is easier, quicker, and cheaper to change policy.
Government makes lots of money out of taxes of tobacco products, cigarettes, etc. They could be making more money if they raise the taxes really high, so that they make the use pretty unattractive to the general public. And I'm wondering if that could work, or is it going to be a situation of unaffordability, and then they lose out on that revenue stream as far as taxes is concerned?
So, I mean, that is one of our very big successes, and one of the best ways in public health to change behavior. And we lobby all the time for government to introduce the taxes, and you're absolutely correct. There should not be small increases. Last year it was about R1.22 on a pack. It's too small to change behavior. So we're at 52% of the price currently is the excise taxes. But according to the World Health Organization, it should be 70%. Okay, so we've got opportunity to increase, and the bigger the increase, we see it with other things, with potatoes, with milk, with sugar, with any other product that we buy. When the price goes up quickly, very high, we change our consumption pattern.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is something we've been, engaging government with on a regular basis, and they do have that fear. We believe that there might be a potential financial loss to them, but it's there will always be a certain percentage in that increase that will still give Treasury a continuous increase every year, even if they increase because a certain number of people are addicted, and they will struggle, in the short term to stop smoking.
All right, we have about 2 minutes to wrap up time.
Sure.
Do you assist the larger public in trying to kick the habit by introducing anti-smoking programs, etc.? Is something like that in place? And if there is something, when, how do you access the service?
Okay, so we run a telephone counselling quit line where we provide support over the phone. The number is 011 720 3145. We also have a website, which is www.againstsmoking.coza. And, you find other organizations like Cancer, for example. They have an online course called e-kickbutt, sorry. And, so all of these organizations do provide this kind of support for people to give up smoking.
Final words?
Our final words is that, we ask people to think about the impact of their behavior, which with young people it's really difficult. But when you are 55, 65, and you think, I could have lived until 80 if I change what I do today. It might not seem important to a 15 or 20-year-old, but it's extremely important to a 40 or 50-year-old to realize the difference between 15 years of life or 30 years of life. So they really need to think about what they're doing and take action themselves today and call us to help them quit.
Thank you indeed for being with us, and we do hope that a very strong message has been sent out to our viewers this morning with your whole issue around anti-smoking. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And we do hope that that is going to make you stop puffing. Still to come on the show, we're going to be talking to BDSA about the clover factory in South Africa, which has been bought out by an Israeli organization. And we're also going to be looking at how to buy on auction. Welcome back. We now have the CEO from Bidder's Choice. He's going to talk about everything you ever needed to or wanted to know about buying on auction, an area that I'm very nervous about because my perception of buying on auction is always that you as a buyer kind of stands to lose, and the auctioneer or whoever it is that are selling their goods on auction stand to make a big fat profit. I'm not sure if that is actually true or not, but the CEO of Bidder's Choice, Pieter Geldenhuys, is here to talk to us about what you need to know to buy on auction. Good morning, welcome to the program.
Morning, Julie. It's only a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time out to come and give us a masterclass on something that's not very well known. So, who is your typical buyer at an auction, and why would they prefer to choose that as a mode of transaction rather than a straight sale via an estate agent or a car dealership or whatever else, as far as movables are concerned, going to a furniture store or an art gallery, etc.?
Julia, there are different type of buyers out there. You get your normal speculators, you get investors, people that want to invest in a long term and that purely make money from buying and selling also. You get a lot of buyers at auctions who are dealers also, being car dealers, art dealers, and then they come to auctions to buy, to get stock there, because that's a central point of getting stock, and then they don't have to go and shop individually with different people. So to answer your question in terms of who are the buyers, it's a wide spectrum of people, and a lot of times it's also end users, people who want to come and buy a specific item, a specific car, specific truck, or specific type of art collection at the auction, which they might have identified as they've picked up where the auction is being advertised. There are various reasons for people attending auctions, and then buyers must prepare themselves for an auction. They must actually know exactly before the auction what type of money they want to spend at an auction. They must do their homework before the auction, and a lot of regular auction buyers know how it works. They know they must prepare themselves, and they don't get carried away with the process. That's very important.
When we talk auctions, I'm ultra conservative. I much prefer going into a store, possibly scouting around, comparing prices from 3-4 different outlets, and then deciding, okay, that's the item I want, that's the best price I'm getting at, so I'll go to store A rather than to store C, and it gives me peace of mind shopping that way. And we also know that auctions is really a very old way, apart from bartering, was one of the first ways of really transacting between buyer and seller. And yet in this modern day and age, apart from what it seems like a select few, the larger public are not kind of vested in this way of trading. Why?
I think it's also a matter of education from the auctioneer side and from general public. Yes, you do get a lot of people who are very conservative, to make use of your example, and it's actually a good idea, to go and shop and make sure that whatever you buy. And the reason for that is it's actually very simple. You get a guarantee, and you want to feel safe and secure that if something goes wrong with the product, then you can take it back to the dealer or to the seller. But unfortunately, auctions are whatever you buy on auction is
amper voetstoets.
You buy it as is,
Right.
And in the condition that it is. The auctioneer is not a dealer, so to speak, in certain items, who can give you a guarantee on the item for a period of time afterwards. And then it's just a way that the people and the general public out there, they see auctions that it's not for them, because they're hesitant. Once again, they're not sure how to, what to, when to, and then also they haven't prepared their themselves for the auction. It depends what you like, it depends what you're in for, and it also depends on what is the purpose for you when you buy a certain asset or looking for a certain asset. If you want to buy it and maybe look for a bargain, it's the way to go. There are always bargains on auctions, and the opposite is also true. There are a lot of people who overpay at auctions because they get carried away with the whole process and the dynamics of an auction. So, auctions are direct.
Forgive me for being skeptical.
Yeah.
I just can't seem to see this being a win-win situation, buying, via an auction, because to me it seems like you're always going to have a situation of someone who's gained and someone who's actually lost out on the deal.
It's not always true. You know what? Way back, there are people who will always say, I've bought this bargain, this item, it normally sells for 10,000 Rand, and I've bought it for 2,000 Rand at an auction. So what a bargain. So then everybody will go. But to the contrary, if somebody has bought an item and the value is 10,000 and they paid 15,000, you won't hear about it. But it is always the perception that is in the market. It's got to do with people who are uneducated and people who wants to, sorry to make use of the word, who wants to show off. But okay, to answer your question, why would I go to an auction? Once again, you know, it depends in what type of market you are. It depends what is your necessity. Not everybody can buy everything on auction, and not everything is always on auction. It depends on what is the situation, and auctions are direct. You know, if you buy an auction, you know, once the bid has been knocked down on you, you know immediately whether you have successfully won the bid, and or if you have bought it, and or if you've lost out. So auctions are direct. There's a specific time limit to it. You don't have to wait and go and walk around and shop around. If you go to an auction, immediately, if you have prepared yourself, you know it is a one-on-one direct transaction. You buy, you pay, and off you go.
As far as auctions are concerned, do you have a specific market or specific goods? I know property seems to be also a way that people seem to sell and buy, but are there other movables that are more lucrative or more attractive to be sold via auction rather than the traditional way?
It depends once again on the demand, and it depends also on what the sellers need to do. Everything from household furniture to vehicles to earth-moving equipment do come on auction, and a lot of people prefer to make use of the auction route, really simply for the fact that it is a limited time period, it's direct, there's no time delay. So, you know, to answer your question, there are auctioneers who only specialize in household items. Then they will source that market for people who are interested in buying household items. There are auctioneers who only specialize in vehicles. Same story there. They will then source the market for people buying and selling who are in the vehicle trade, and also earth-moving equipment. So everything goes to auction. It depends. And then also dealers, you might get your dealers who are sitting with surplus stock. So what do they do now? Then they send it to an auctioneer, and immediately, you know, within 2 or 3 weeks, they get their cash from that surplus stock that is sitting on their floor. You get a lot of dealers, motor dealers, you get mines also. They're sitting with redundant stock. What do? The best way for them is to go to auction, get it quickly, get it done. You get a lot of interested people at the same time. They bid and they compete against each other for the same product. So that will determine the price. Bottom line is where there are surplus stock in the market, sellers always prefer auction. And the reason for that being is it's quick, it's a speed method to go to get their cash, and they don't have to sit and wait to sell one item by one item by one item over a long period of time. Everything is being collected and it's been sold at one specific point.
Property, buying and selling of property on auction seems to be a pretty lucrative market. Why is that? And does it cost the buyer or the seller more to buy and sell via auction their property, or can they get really good deals, willing buyer, willing seller, happy buyer, happy seller via the auction?
You know, I always maintain that people, and there's for everybody, there's a place under the sun. And I'm referring to estate agents and auctioneers. Certain stock is good auction stock, certain stock is not good auction stock. So that is also applicable to property. A lot of people prefer to sell their property via auction, being it banks, being it liquidators, being it trustees, and even private people. Simple reason behind it, there are a few reasons. It's time, as we always say, it's decision time for buyer and seller. It's a point of decision making, and there's a limited time period to it. Once you start marketing the property, it's a 4-week time cyclus, and then, you know, within 4 weeks I will know exactly whether my property is sold or not. And then also the terms and conditions for the auction are being advertised beforehand, so buyers know exactly what are the terms and conditions, and they know exactly, they don't have to wait for the buyer to come back to them and compare it with other offers. They will know exactly immediately on the day of the auction or within 2 or 3 days after the auction whether their offer has been accepted. And why do the sellers go to auction? They know auctions are non-suspensive, meaning if you come to bid at an auction, you need to be prepared. You can't buy on auction, and when a bid has been knocked down on you, you can say, yeah, well, you know what, I want to make it subject to my house that must be sold first, or to my property, or subject to bond approval.
What happens in a case like that? Are you legally liable for that then? But let's look at that right after the ad break. We're talking about how to buy and sell on auction. Is it a lucrative way of buying and selling? Are there any tricks? Do they have perhaps spotters, or do they have people that are employed by the company that push up the bid? That's something that's been in the back of my mind for a long time, but we'll put that question to my guest. All of that and more right after the ad break. Pieter Geldenhuys, the CEO of Bidder's Choice, is in studio talking about, I should imagine, the pitfalls of buying and selling on auction. Now, just before we went for the ad break, I spoke about people in the audience that has been placed there by the auctioneers to drive up the bid. That's not a wrong perception on my part. This, in fact, does happen, does it not?
It depends on the way the auction is advertised, and it depends on what type of auction you have. You will see in any terms and conditions of an auctioneer, and it has changed over the last few years, that the auctioneer is entitled to bid up to the reserve price of a certain item. So
is it legal?
Auction, it is legal. It's been published in the terms and conditions of any auction. But the problem is, once again, the buyers tend not to be educated, and they're not willing to educate themselves with the terms and conditions. The terms and conditions are provided before, and it's public knowledge. It's been published on any auctioneer's website before the auction. And even if somebody registers for an auction, they get the terms and conditions, a hard copy of the terms and conditions. So any auctioneer is entitled to bid on behalf of the seller or the auctioneer up to a reserved price. But sometimes the people say, yeah, you plant people at the auction, or you have a ghost bidder, or whatever.
Yes. Is that what it's referred to, a ghost bidder?
The ghost bidder. But
right.
I always maintain the ghosts are all in the graveyard, so leave them alone.
Okay.
But with all due respect,
if I engage with you and I ask you to sell my house, because yes, I've been told by someone that to sell property, the best way and the quickest way to get rid of property is put it on auction. But does that not make the property more expensive? What are the costs involved, and what's the deal or the agreement between you and I as regards the sale of the house? And if the house does not get sold, again, how do we part
yes,
company?
The normally, if you buy or if you want to sell your property on auction, you will obviously contact the auctioneer. The auctioneer will advise you in terms of a valuation that he will give you in terms of the price. He will guide you, give you guidance, and say to you, okay, Julie, this is more or less what we can expect on auction. Are you willing and prepared to take or walk the process with us? That's one. And if you're not happy with what the auctioneer is advising you in terms of value, then obviously you part ways and there's no deal. Secondly, you as the seller must give the auctioneer a sole mandate to market the property for the auction, and then obviously for a certain period of time till after the auction. And then thirdly,
how long does that, when you sell a property traditionally, you get tied up with a mandate for up to 12 months perhaps. But, we are told that via auction, you're going to get almost guaranteed a quick sale. So what's the mandate look like with auctioneers?
The mandate will run from the day that you give the auctioneer instruction to start marketing the property, and normally a marketing process runs for 4 to 5 weeks. And then it depends from auctioneer to auctioneer till after the auction, maybe 30 days or 60 days. That is when the mandate then will stop. But as I say, depends from auction company to auction company. Certain people will take it longer, and other people will say, okay, you know what, 30 days after the auction, if nothing happens, we walk away from each other. But then also, you must, to go back to your first question, you must understand you as a seller has an obligation towards certain costs, towards certain advertising costs. But the auctioneer will provide you with a marketing budget, which he will show to you where he's going to advertise and how the advertising campaign will look like, and the wording for the advertisement, and where will they advertise and when will they advertise where. So that cost normally is to be bared by the seller. And some of the auctioneers come to an agreement with the seller and say, listen, the advertising is X. If we sell, we're going to only charge you Y, or we will give you a rebate. So it's not hard and fast. And then the commission is being paid by the purchaser. So you as the seller has only limited costs. If your property is worth, for instance, 5 million rand, and your advertising cost is going to be, for instance, 30,000 rand, it's going to be much less than the commission, than the traditional commission that you have to stand off with an estate agent. But as I've said to you, remember, not everything is sellable on auction. There are certain properties that is good auction stock, and certain properties that's not good auction stock. And then if the property sells, everybody will be happy, the seller is happy, the buyer will be happy, and then obviously you as the seller must sign the terms and conditions, and then the property follows a normal transfer process.
So the seller is only liable for possibly the marketing and advertising.
Yeah.
The buyer will then obviously be paying the
auctioneer's commission.
Which is what percentage?
It depends, once again, from auctioneer to auctioneer. Some of the people charge up to 10%, some of them charge 5%, 6%, 7.5%. It depends from, there's no hard and fast rule, there's no cost rule.
But there's the VAT to be paid as well.
The purchaser pays the VAT on the commission part.
Okay,
yeah.
So they need to do their homework very well, because they're going to have to pay the auctioneer's fee, and they're going to have to pay the VAT on that property, the capital gains tax,
No. The only VAT portion that the purchaser will pay or be liable for is one, on the commission. And should a property, remember, you either pay VAT or transfer duty if you buy property in South Africa, and then it depends on whoever.
Oh, the seller pays the capital gains tax.
The seller will pay the capital.
That's right,
that's taxed on the seller.
What happens if you have buyer's remorse? Like with every, we've got a great Consumers Act in the country. You are, as a consumer, protected. You can take goods back in a specific period of time. Even with estate agents, you can cancel the deal also in a specified time. What happens with auction? What happens when you have buyer's remorse?
That's why I said right in the beginning, if people go to an auction, they must prepare themselves. They must read the terms and conditions. They must make sure, what they're letting themselves in for. And auctions are different to where you buy from a dealer, where you can take the stock back. Once you bid on an auction, it is a legally binding transaction without any suspensive conditions afterwards. So, fortunately and or unfortunately for a buyer, if you have buyer's remorse, you're going to end up with problems from the auctioneer and the seller, so you can't just pull out afterwards. Hence I say, please make sure that you prepare yourself for the auction. You know exactly what you're letting you in for. Inspect whatever, being it a property, movable item, inspect it before the auction. The auctioneer will always give you enough time to inspect the property, to inspect the terms and conditions of the auction. So if you get buyer's remorse, it might
You're stuck with it. There's nothing you can do.
You're going to have a problem afterwards. So,
okay.
And then people get carried away on auction. So always decide before the auction. And that's why what I always say to my buyers, make sure that you don't exceed what you are prepared to bid for at the auction. Even if the pressure is how much, and if everybody is putting pressure on you, and or if you want to show off, don't show off. Don't exceed your limit. Don't exceed what you prepared yourself for before the auction. And that's normally when people get buyer's remorse, because they didn't stick to their own rules. They didn't stick to what they have prepared for. And then they got carried away during the auction. And then all of a sudden afterwards, you know, they want to pull out, and they will find a reason to pull out. It's easy to find many reasons, or not many reasons. It's easy to find a reason, but it might be a problem.
Okay. You'll probably be lumped with legal fees, etc., or some sort of penalty.
Correct.
So easier said than done. I know that people in the know, possibly real estate agents and other interested parties, do scout the local sheriff's offices to see property that's been repossessed possibly, and other movables, and then they attend those auctions, and I'm told that they do pick up amazing bargains. Your take on the matter?
Yeah, we don't get involved in sheriff auctions. It's not our business. And sheriffs do have a place in the market. They sell where it is a sale and execution, where a property is being attached, or property or item has been attached by creditors or by a court of law, by the court of law and a court order, and any creditor will obviously become a court order once the person is in debt with them and they haven't met their debt or their repayments. So sheriff deal on a different basis. They deal with a different type of property, and they also deal with a different type of legal process than your normal professional auctioneers. Yes, there are bargains at sheriff auctions, and yes, there are people who are paying more than what they expected to pay. It's all about perceptions out there.
And in closing, your final words to our viewers: should we stay away from auctions if we don't do our homework, or if we want to educate ourselves more as far as buying and selling on auctions, where do we go to?
Go to, you will see, in all the professional auctioneers are registered to the South African Institute of Auctioneers. That's the governing body of the auctioneers. So you can go to SAIA website, and there's a lot of information on the Institute's website in terms of how to prepare, what to look out for an auction. And very important, don't support an auctioneer who is not a registered member with the South African Institute of Auctioneers, because that is where the problem is. There are a lot of auctioneers out there, we call it fly-by-nights, and that is where the problem starts. You know, they will sell anything and everything to anybody and everybody, and then people will be taken for a ride, and then they say, then perceptions start, and they say, yeah, you know what, auctioneers, they this and that, but meantime, way back, they haven't done their homework. They must make sure that an auctioneer is registered with the Institute. And I can guarantee you, all those guys who are registered with the Institute, we have our regular annual AGMs, and we are there to serve the public. We are there to serve buyers and sellers, and at the end of the day, we want a buyer to be happy and we want a seller to be happy, because the process is transparent and open.
And you are an above board business like any other business in the market, and you are there to serve the public. That being said, let's assume I do go to a reputable auctioneer and for some reason something goes horribly wrong, whether I'm a buyer or a seller. Can I go to the Institute to lodge a complaint or for some guidance?
Absolutely. That is why the Institute is there. And once again, I don't know any professional auctioneer who is out there and who belongs to SAIA, who's out there to gun the general public, because that is our market, that is our support. All of us are in it for the long run. We want to serve a purpose, we want to serve the public, and we want them to attend auctions, but they must prepare themselves.
And it can be a win-win situation.
It is a win-win situation for buyer and seller. It depends on your mindset, and it depends on the way you approach the auction.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you indeed for your time.
You're welcome.
And there you have it, Pieter Geldenhuys, the CEO of Bidder's Choice, outlining the pros and cons of buying on auction, buying or selling for that matter. And he does say no, auctioneers are not crooks. It is and can be a win-win situation. If you go to a registered auctioneer, they will be the best people to advise you and help you draw up a contract between yourselves for both you and the auctioneer to get the best deal out of the sale. Don't go away. We're going to now talk to the BDSA about the sale of Clover South Africa to an Israeli company. And welcome back. The very serious stuff is going to be discussed now. We have the spokesperson from BDS. His name is Tesetso Magama, and born and bred activist, a true blue activist. He's going to tell us a little bit about his background and then talk about why BDS is putting their weight behind the Clover SA buyout by an Israeli firm. Good morning, welcome to the program.
Good morning and thank you very much.
Lovely to have you here. So I know that you're a member of parliament, I know that you've been an activist, and I know you've been around high flyers all your life. How did your journey in activism start?
Well, really, my activism started at the age of about 11 years. Having grown up in a township and having experienced the vagaries of apartheid at such a young age, I was naturally drawn towards the struggle. And of course, so I became an activist, student activist in my area in the Northern Cape in Uppington. And I later, went into after the unbanning, joined the movement and occupied official positions and so on. Eventually, I ended up in Parliament in 2009, after which I became chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on International Relations. I was then later, when I left Parliament, asked by the board of BDS SA to join BDS, in particular due to the work that I did, of course, together with the collective in Parliament on the Palestinian question.
So you have really been vested in this issue for a long, long time?
No, absolutely.
All right. As we speak now, you've moved away from Parliament. You've now joined BDS in a full-time position. You're also their spokesperson.
Well, I'm a board member of BDS.
Right.
After the resignation of Kwara, the spokesperson, who then moved to another profession, I was then asked to act as a spokesperson for the moment. But I'm a board member actually of the organization.
Okay. And what else are you involved in?
Well, BDS is my primary area of focus politically at the moment. Of course, I'm also involved in other solidarity movements, the Cuba, the Venezuelan issues. And of course, I also have a keen interest in issues relating to the Global South and in particular the African continent.
We are heading to an election this year. And there's a lot of speculation about all the different political parties and all of their different agendas, etc. Then there's a group, and I might add a huge group of people who are very undecided at this point in time. We're not sure how they're going to be swayed by which political party, and everyone's making huge promises. Without, giving away your personal views, as an observer, what would you advise the general South African person? How should they be thinking going forward about the elections and how they cast their votes? What's their impact going to be like on the country?
Look, the vote is something that we fought for hard, we paid a high price in the treasure of our country and the blood of our martyrs. And so it's something that we should not take lightly. Now, having said that, as South Africans, first and foremost, we have a primary responsibility to ensure that we elect parties into power that are concerned about the issues that we are concerned about. And so from a Palestinian solidarity perspective, I take the view that if the Palestinian question is an issue that people are concerned about, I would hope that they would support parties that are as concerned about the Palestinian question and that stand on the right side of history on this particular issue. And so that applies to a whole range of other issues, domestic and of course international. I mean, if you take another example, what I view as almost atrocious, what is happening in Venezuela is another example. If people are concerned about Venezuela or Latin America, or in fact even Africa for that matter, they should, vote for parties on the basis of what they are concerned about. And so in the context of, as I said, to the Palestinian question, look, ultimately parties are about getting into power to govern the republic. And if we don't use our power as citizens, and this is one of the few instances when we go to the polls, where we can actually influence the long-term strategic outcomes of our country. And so what's the point in voting for a party today that is not concerned about what you are concerned about? So again, in the context of the Palestinian issue, I would really, really hope that people would support parties that are standing on the right side of history, that recognize the atrocities that are taking place there, and are taking positions that are commensurate with human rights, and all other values and principles that we hold dear.
I'm just going to kind of digress a little bit and still stick with the South African upcoming elections.
Right.
And ask this question to you. Your view on the issue, and we know from the time of Jacob Zuma's tenure up to now, we're still seeing masses and major companies, corporates and conglomerates that have been involved and are involved in corruption. I think you know where I'm going to with this question, which is possibly crippling the country. And this is now playing out in front of us right now, knowing that the elections is just around the corner. How's that going to hurt the different political parties? How do they save their face from something like that? And when you look at the billions upon billions upon billions of rands and resources that the greedy few have got their hands on, and you think about if that money was spent correctly to uplift this country, for the people that need it the most, housing, education, which is key, hospitalization, healthcare, and employment of youth. We're sitting with 4 or more major issues. How do you still give hope to all of these people, knowing that this terrible debacle is playing out around the whole the Gupta issue is not even cold yet, and now we have Bosasa playing out at the moment, and we don't know what's next to come, what is still to come.
Look, firstly, let me say, as a civil society organization that is concerned about the daily lives of our people here as well, we are, I think, in tandem with the rest of society. That matters. Outraged,
I should imagine.
No, absolutely. We should be outraged about what we hear. There's no question about it. But as South Africans, I think we have a bigger responsibility, that is to look to the long-term future of our country. And in doing so, deal with the issues that are facing us now, such as corruption. I have and this is now my personal view.
Sure.
I maintain hope, firstly, for this reason. We have fought a brutal system of colonialism and neo-colonialism and what we refer to as colonialism of a special type for over 300 years. Our leaders, historically, I mean, one of the first battles of resistance that were fought against the European colonizers was in the late 1600s by the Khoi. And then a number of other wars of resistance were fought by the different tribes, you know, from Hintsa to Ngungunyani and others, ending with the 1906 rebellion in KZN by Chief Bambata. As a people, we have come a long way. And we have overthrown a system that until one day or so before, nobody thought that it was going to crumble.
Absolutely.
And so dealing with corruption in that context, dealing with corruption as serious as it is, as crippling as it is, as insidious as it is not as you know, big as the monster that we stared in the face, right? So in that context, I have hope that we are a people that have shown throughout history that we have resilience, we have the tenacity to overcome such challenges. And I'm very much hopeful with the appointment of the new Director of National Prosecution.
Shamila Batoy.
Yes, you know, a lot of these things will be dealt with. We see indications from the President of the Republic that he seems to be serious about dealing with the scourge of corruption. We see civil society putting the appropriate pressure on government to deal with this issue. We hear religious leaders from all walks of life, you know, the trade union movement, and everybody is concerned about this issue. So what we have shown is that, again, from our historical experience, that if we band together across political divide, faith, and all these other divides, that we are able to, with that consensus, move beyond the immediate challenge. And so I'm looking at it from a long-term perspective. So it's good that these things come out, because it will be a tragedy and actually regressive to some extent if we are to deal with the issues that we face now, and then 2, 3, 5, 10 years later, we hear there's a lot of other stuff that hasn't come out yet. You get my point? I mean, if you look at the same logic, I mean, now there was a letter that I saw, for instance, from former commissioners of the TRC who are saying, look, there are issues that have not been finalized coming from the TRC process, you know, amnesty and so on and so on. Some of the people were never prosecuted, some of them were never applied for amnesty.
All this time later.
Exactly. So now it's opening an old wound that has sort of almost begun to heal. You get my point. I'm saying, using that analogy, it'll also be tragic if 10 years down, 20 years down the line, new allegations and new evidence, for that matter, emerges. So let's open the wound, you know, let it open, you know, let's open it and let's deal with this thing and deal with it decisively. But I must stress, as much as we are outraged, I am not dejected, and we should not be dejected. The fight against corruption is a long one. You go to established democracies, you go to the US, the UK. I mean, you look at countries like Switzerland as an example, that we know has for decades and decades been, you know, the depository of all the corrupt money from all walks of life. Swiss accounts.
It was a safe haven.
It was a safe haven for all the corrupt money
and
that
still
came.
Is, I think.
No, and still is, absolutely. That came from all these corrupt leaders today.
All right, we need to go for an ad break. I'm talking to a representative from BDS. We are going to touch on the Palestinian issue and Clover, South Africa, but I couldn't resist putting these questions to my very learned activist friend that's in studio with us this morning. Don't go away. We're going for an ad break and we'll be back in a minute or two. Teteso Magama from the BDS is my guest. We are here to talk about the Clover buyout by an Israeli company, but I really couldn't resist those few questions leading up to this part of the interview, and I think he's given us a great overview. He's given us food for thought, and he has promised that he will come in and talk to us again closer to election time, so watch out for that interview. Now, we've talked a little bit about colonialism. We were in the grip of white apartheid rule for over 300 years. We know what it felt like. We know how it broke the black man's psyche. We didn't have an identity, we didn't have a backbone. And of course, people like you, activists, came and spoke for us, spoke on our behalf, and thank God, almost 25 years later, you know, look where we are. But we do know there's a long fight ahead of us. But when we look at the South African situation, how do we compare it with the atrocities being played out by the Israeli apartheid government on the helpless Palestinian people?
You know, the Israeli government and its supporters go out of their way to try to avoid comparisons between South Africa and Israel, or what is happening in the occupied Palestinian territories. And it's absolutely incredible. But then you can understand that it's merely part of a propaganda, drive. The similarities, and firstly, no two situations are ever identical.
Of course.
So there will always be nuances. But in terms of the general experience, it's very much similar. I mean, like in apartheid South Africa, you have discriminatory laws. You have a whole regime, of checkpoints, that doesn't allow the free movement of Palestinians. So in many respects, it's worse. And I mean, almost every single leader who has gone there has made that assessment, that it's in many ways even worse. I mean, you go to some areas, you find that very few males above the age of 10 have been in prison. So a whole population is being traumatized, and it's absolutely incredible.
And to break down their psyche completely.
No, absolutely. Remember, in its very conception and inherently, occupation is a brutal system. Because wherever you have occupation, there will always be the people, the occupied, will always want to throw off the yoke, the chains of their oppression. And the more they try to throw off the yoke of this oppression, the more brutal the system becomes to suppress that uprising. And so what we see in Palestine is exactly that. Mm-hmm. It's a ever tightening, strangulation of an entire population.
Absolutely.
With no hope, at least from gleaning from Israeli action, with no hope, at least in the immediate future, of a fundamental change in the situation. And Israel has made it very clear they are not interested in negotiations.
And the rest of the world are just quiet bystanders, because you're talking about a white, obviously a monopoly that is ruling the black or the brown people in that part of the world. That being said, there's been a huge outcry in South Africa. I know it's all over different social media platforms, and that's the issue around Clover South Africa being bought out by an Israeli company. But this is not unique, this is not new. We've also had issues around certain department stores like Woolies, for example, and they are still to this day carrying products and selling products that has been imported from Israel on the backs of the poor Palestinian people.
Look, we are extremely concerned. We've released a press statement this morning about our views on this particular issue. Firstly, we have done some investigations. This is not just that this company is from Israel, but it is a company that is complicit in the occupation of Palestinians. Uh-huh. The Central Bottling Company owns distribution centers and other of its operations in the occupied Palestinian territories. And they are located within Jewish-only settlements. Now, over and above, they also have a distribution center in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights. More than that, they are preventing the National Beverage Company owned by Palestinians to do business in East Jerusalem. This is a company that has given something like 150,000 rands to a right-wing fascist, racist organization called Im Tirzu that supports the IDF, and IDF soldiers, advocate for them and push for preferential grants to be granted to these IDF soldiers. I mean, they have, for instance, given...
IDF being Israeli Defense Force.
Israeli Defense Force.
Right.
That is, I mean, we know how brutal the IDF is.
Absolutely.
Against Palestinians. I mean, we know, for instance, if a Palestinian, say, for instance, as an example, steals something that you go normally to the police station and then to a jail.
Of minimal value.
Exactly, now, a Jewish child in Israel will go through the normal court process. A Palestinian child will be held before a military tribunal.
Sure.
And be given, extended sentences. In fact, the military tribunals have an atrocious record of almost 100% convictions for Palestinians. So it's absolutely incredible. So they gave, the same company, Central Bottling Company, gave held an honorary event for a brigadier general, Elim Benazir, who was responsible for the 2009 Gaza attacks. So this is a company that is actively participating in the occupation.
And the brutality of the
The brutality
Palestinian
that
people.
supports the brutality of that occupation. So this is not just an Israeli company, which would, for instance, because we know our detractors will say, you see, this is anti-Semitism. No. This is a company that is actually involved in the occupation of Palestinians. It's involved in the land theft. It's involved in the aggrandizement of war criminals. So we are very concerned about it. Having said that,
sadly, what strikes me is that up to today, Jewish settlers all around the world are calling for all sorts of accountability, very much like possibly what we had, the TRC, by these supposed war Nazi criminals. They don't even let go of that. That's an ongoing saga in their lives till they can get some form of compensation or recognition for the hardship that they and their forefathers had undergone during that time. And it seems as if their memories are very short, because the same atrocities are being meted out to helpless Palestinian people.
One Jewish scholar actually said that the greatest tragedy of our times is that a people who themselves have experienced persecution.
Absolutely.
And oppression are now the ones perpetrating that against another people. So that's the greatest tragedy of our times. Look, the experience of the Jewish people in Europe
and we're not dismissing it. We're not dismissing it.
It's a very painful one. It's a blot, it's a stain on humanity.
Absolutely.
Such actions should be condemned. We should continue to condemn them, both as historically, but also in the current times. But equally, we should have the courage of conviction to say that when they perpetrate these crimes against another people, they should be equally condemned.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we've got about 2 minutes left to wrap up time. I could sit here all day talking to you and picking your brain. What ought we be doing in support of the Palestinian people as far as the Clover buyout is concerned?
Just two things. The one is we will be having a meeting, with the Brimstone, the South African company. We will be communicating our concerns, and we will, of course, hear what they have to say about it. If they do not desist from this deal, we intend to initiate or support or join a campaign with our partners, and we are in talks with them, to boycott all Clover products until they, adhere to their responsibility on this particular issue. And so we will vociferously campaign together with our partners to ensure that this thing does not happen. Brimstone
it's not a done deal as yet.
Not yet. Look, we want to give Brimstone the opportunity to engage, to hear what they have to say about it. Remember, this process will still take a little bit of time because it still has to go through the regulatory authorities, especially the Competition Commission. We hope we can convince them not to proceed, failing which, of course, we really intend to take up a very militant but peaceful campaign and mobilize society around this issue. And we are seriously looking into it. Very, very seriously.
Well, we'll be watching the space so that we'll take our cue from you, whether we start the boycott or not. But just very quickly, tell us about previous successful campaigns that was run by your company.
Look, we've had quite a number. We, for instance, have a very effective academic boycott. As you would have seen, some of our own universities here have distanced themselves from, working with Israeli, academic institutions. We have, for instance, an annual Israeli Apartheid Week, which I hoped that we would have had a chance to talk about, but it's starting now from the 1st of April to the 7th of April.
We'll call you in again to talk about
it. That's fine. That's fine. So there have been quite a number of, strides that we've made. But suffice it to say that this time around, part of our focus is to, pull in the SADC region, on this issue. We know that we have quite solid partners in the SADC region with which we are actually working to make this thing a reality, because the critical issue is to massify the campaign, to multiply, to have that multiplier effect, to ensure its success and maximal impact.
And the key word there is a peaceful campaign.
A peaceful campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you indeed for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Do know that we are behind you. We, the South African public, are behind you all the way. Can't wait to hear how it's going to unfold. And may you guys live, carry on from success to success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having our backs.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
That was obviously BDS, Tetetso Magama, talking about possibly the upcoming Clover boycott campaign. It's not happening as yet. Please be aware that it might start rolling out as soon as the talks have been concluded. That's it for our show today. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed my company as much as we've enjoyed being with you. Please, can we do that again? I'm so sorry. Thank God it's pre-recorded. Let's just get that little bit out. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
No, thank you so much.
Can we just redo that little bit? Okay. Sorry, I need to hear what you're saying. What do you want me to do? Where must I take it from? Must I thank Tesetso and then Tesetso?
Tesetso.
Tesetso. And then I can look at the camera. Thank you. Thank you indeed for being with us. Thank you for having our backs. We wish you strength going forward. What would we do without BDS? So please, long live BDS. And there you have it. That's our show for today. Thank you so much for your company. Do hope you've enjoyed the discussions on air. Till the next time, please take care on the roads. A big thank you to the Let's Talk production team. And as always, take care on the roads. And it is Khudafiz from me, Julie Alli.
يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا 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 هلا